Yes, but like definitely not listening to the impressions as of right now. But like Lucas right now having already reached like the outer fences of like Bruno like the laboratory. Definitely, I'm still thinking of my birthday impression that like the area or like part of like the fence through which like Hopper had basically the part of like the fence that Hopper had like recently cut off to like for him to like infiltrate when he had infiltrated into like Pranav lab, like that part of the fence that like Hawks had cut off, like definitely by now would be like probably would have got fixed and restored back to its like use itself, and that area of like the fence as well would be like properly restored and fixed by now. It's definitely going to finish. So like that way, my just impression that like because I'm the circling around like the fence into like the scenario that I'm also thinking is for like Lucas to like circle around like the fence all the way into like basically eventually reaching that main entrance all the way towards like the main vehicle entrance like area of that Pranav Jila through which like Hopper basically initially for like the first time had entered into like Pranav's energy lab the first like vehicle first definitely remember that. So like there like I'm just like Lucas steadily leaving his like bicycle like nearby in like the forest area and like Lucas trying to like stealthy without the security guard finding out like Lucas stealthily trying to like enter through that area like the scenario that I was running. But like I was running at it looked like the moment like Lucas had basically left with like the compass out of his phone uh, itself like basically is there was like one of like the people working for Foreigner like the even like standing right outside of that Lucas's home. I'm definitely running into totally has to do with like that woman who's like working for Foreigner like found having gotten like the list of like the students who will be like interested who will be like who are like into science and everything in like Hawkins made it through like the science paper. So like through that list, like definitely Lucas might as well as Dustin's names would be definitely would have definitely been present in that list that like the science paper would have given to that it's definitely one of the list. And there will be like a list that is like there will be also names of other children as well, but definitely there would have been like the list of like Michael Lucas's question as well. It's definitely one of the list. So like because of this reason I'm just like the next decision that woman might have took might have been she might have sent bunch of like happening to like basically like surveillance or like spy stand right outside like in disguise like as well like the police officer to like stand right outside like the each and every single house of like the students in that just and like spy on them. So like that might be how like and that would be totally how like that police person or like that person who is like I think like maybe disguised as like a police person and definitely he's like working for like one of like standing outside of like the so everywhere. So that was like setting off with his like box of weapons so he's definitely weapons. So like he might have totally followed Lucas like basically traveling with his like compass like all the way to like even to like the very person that like Lucas right now all the way made the compass and made it through like the fence was like from the laboratory. He might have still probably kept up with like following us because definitely was bring us in. But like as the scenario that I'm going to bring us like while Lucas would be like still trying to like pass through that like whole vehicle entrance main vehicle entrance area of like Pranav lab like at that point still was bringing that uh, that says person who's like working for like one or like him following Lucas all the way into like basically making it all the way there and basically him presently capturing Lucas and what's going happening would be happening precisely at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm in that way. Him taking Lucas to like Appranas and Abu like the scenario that I'm also bringing. And and then like I'm about like Lucas it's like 11 like Lucas ending up being like a prisoner in like Brand of like an Abdul about it's like the scenario that I'm about to bring. But like Lucas would be only be ending up being staying in such an important state for only just like at most like I'm running for only just like 1 or 2 days. Or like at like the maximum ambassador maybe ambassador like it will most likely like the very next day, like on the night of it, the very next day ambassador like Mike, Lucas, Mike and Dustin along with like 11 would be like integrating into like run of energy laboratory with that absolute mission to like save Lucas mission and they will like they would be like saved Lucas precisely and solely due to like mainly due to like 11's help like and 11's like superpower like basically like them being able to like save Lucas is like the scenario that I'm doing and at that point definitely Lucas would be having all that jealousy towards like and dislike towards like 11 gone straight away because like by then like Lucas would be like I'm since my reason that by then like Lucas would be like so extremely scared by like Pranab and Pranab's like interrogation method and everything definitely with the embarrassing bomb. I was going like Lucas at that point being totally scared and like revealing everything he knows until this point like about like 11 and everything that like Lucas knows about like Mike and Dustin like everything like I was doing like Lucas totally definitely Lucas would be like totally won't be like that courageous to be able to like hide to keep his like lip silent from especially when like Lucas would be in like I'm totally going for Lucas at that point to be in like a trapped and in person like state all by himself in like from national level. So like I was when Lucas like revealing everything you know to Pranav at that point it's definitely one of the grand person. Yet like I'm looking like Lucas like still being rescued by precisely mainly the team of like Mike Dustin and 11 like rescuing Lucas from like Pranav and they were waiting like the middle of the night with like the scenario that I was and like and then being able to like make it back like the different scenario that I'm looking and like as for like how Mike and Dustin will be finding 11 and then delivering the scenario to be like precisely wise by the time like Lucas will be getting captured and imprisoned in like Pranav in the laboratory precisely in parallel simultaneously during this time like especially right now with like Mike as well as Dustin right now heading over to that booker supermarket where like 11 had basically stolen like the food packages like Amazon like uh, Mike and Dustin after like investigating there like Amazon like Mike and Dustin that thing of like the possibility of like maybe of like the possibility of like 11 since like they had initially found 11 in like market force like maybe like Mike totally coming up with that maybe like Mike totally thinking of like the possibility of like 11 precisely possibly from like supermarket alone, possibly having gone to like Northwood Forest and basically might be hiding in like Northwood Forest would be around the lines like Mike would be totally thinking. It would be like kind of like the conclusion to which like Mike would be coming to stepping on pretty much well, like I'm from Mike and Dustin like searching all over like Northwood Forest with like the scenario that I'm looking and straight away I'm going to bring them heading to like the precise area in like Northwood Forest where they had initially found them. It's like the scenario that I'm going to bring. But like the 11 won't be like, no matter how hard they will be searching, like, they won't be able to like find 11 at all. It's like the scenario that I'm considering. And then I'm considering like Mike and Dustin like finding the searching of all over, that's really trying to search like all over like Emerald for them being fed up with like not being and discouraged with like absolutely even after all that despite of like they're not being like point 11 so like at that point I'm considering like by the time like they would be like thinking of heading back like I'm considering by then I'm totally prepping they would be near to like castle bias at that point is like the scenario that I'm considering so like I'm considering either Mike or doesn't like seeing castle bias at that point and basically them totally reminiscing their memories of like Will and basically on seeing like castle bias and all that but like that would be when like I was doing like all of a sudden like that dog that Will's that dog which would be definitely Will's dog like it's just this was shown entering into the castle bias like I was doing that dog coming out of castle bias towards like Mike and Dustin. At that point it's like the scenario that I was doing and Mike and Dustin like totally at that point being surprised to see like Will's dog there. So like I was doing like uh, that way like and at that point I was wondering like that dog like coming up to like Mike and listening and then petting that dog and then like that dog quickly running into like Castle by with like the scenario that I'm wondering. So like I'm wondering maybe like Mike and Dustin deciding to like check out Castle Bios and basically as they would be like casually just like entering Castle Bios like 11 would be potentially hiding within that this Castle Bios like the scenario that I'm wondering and that will be how I'm wondering Mike and Dustin will be like finding 11 again. It's like the eventual scenario that I'm supposed to open and one with the and their best friend like basically that way like I'm considering like 11 not feeling lonely even though 11 will be like staying hidden in like captive bias like I'm considering like each and every single day like Mike and Lucas as well as like Dustin Even though by then like they will be well and fully aware as to like run of people like basically like spying on them like about like each and every single day that might there was understanding like coming up with like all sorts of like unique strategy to like trick like spies and basically then tricking them each and every single day maybe using disguises and something so like and tricking runners like spies each and every single day and being able to like make it uh into not good form into casting bias and then that way meeting up with like 11 each and every single day is like the eventual possible scenario that I'm looking forward to bring and I'm looking and I was bringing through that interaction that will be happening at that point, like I'm looking like Dustin as well as Mike totally like seriously acting in that fluid mature manner at that point and them actually telling their story to like Eleven that basically like Mike and Dustin like they will be seeing that highest priority of like basically finding will more of like a bigger priority than anything else. And on top of that, like even Mike as well as the thing would be like probably feeling as if like maybe like they were too hard for 11. Those sort of name with 11. That like they would be genuinely saying that so sorry to 11. And that point is like the scenario that I was doing. And that way like 11 would be like totally forgiving Mike and Dustin and like the friendship would be like totally once again getting restored. And that would be when like I was doing like 11 totally feeling that absolute guilt of like hiding that information that Lucas has that 11 at that point would be knowing that Lucas has been Lucas being captured by and it was something like Pronas and Abdul about that like I'm looking like um eventually I'm also bringing like as like 11 and at that point I was bringing like after the friendship being restored between Mike Dustin and 11 like I was bringing them deciding to like head back to like Mike's home like but like I was bringing that right as they will be about to leave Markwood Forest and they will be about to like get close to like Mike's home there like I was bringing like 11 totally from a distance, like noticing, like someone standing, like outside, like kind of like exactly like how like there was like the person working for Brandon standing outside of Lucas's home, like there will be someone standing outside of like Mike's home. So like I was looking, like 11 using 11's like telepathic powers, like I was looking, like 11 being able to like sense that that person is like standing outside Mike's home, like actually someone working for like Pranav is definitely one of the limits. So like even at that point through uh, would be like revealing to like Mike and that's in that basically that person is like it's part of like the people who's like basically trying to capture 11. The 11 lines Mike would 11 would be at that point revealing to like Mike and the things like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I was doing like Mike at that point deciding so like at that point, I was thinking like Mike and Dustin like coming up with like the decision to like basically get 11 back to Castle Buyers and like to make Castle Buyers as like the perfect hiding spot for like 11. So like them getting so like at that point like Mike, Dustin and 11 heading back to Castle Buyers and basically like that ending up being like the official hiding place for 11. So like I was looking like right before like Mike and Dustin would be about to leave, I was going to get to be extreme for like 11 at that point of like hiding the information that Lucas has been captured by like runners by people working for Runner and is like trapped in like a Runner laboratory. So and a lot of time by then would have passed since like a few hours would have passed by then like Lucas getting captured and 11 being able to sense that it's living with Raymond. So right before like Mike and Dustin will be about to after getting 11 back to Castle Buyers and as like Mike and Dustin will be about to actually Castle Buyers like I was like 11 only telling Mike and Dustin that like basically Lucas has been gotten captured and like imprisoned like over in his laboratory. So like the possibility that I'm looking so like I was thinking maybe I'm also proclaiming the possibility that like maybe it would be like that very night itself like I'm also thinking maybe like Mike and Dustin like basically along with like 11 would be executing their whole infiltration rescue Lucas mission and they'll be like infiltrating into like Brennan's laboratory and like saving Lucas and be able to like get back and then getting back in that very night is also like the possibility that I'm looking for. Like if that's the scenario, then I'm wondering maybe especially something like Jonathan as well as like Nancy are also determined to capture or I mean like take the life of that protect monster in like Murder for example to bring maybe I'm considering it will be precisely when once like Mike and Dustin as well as 11 would be like the middle of the night would be like going up to like Pranav energy laboratory and infiltrating Pranav energy laboratory and using like 11 superpowers like them fully succeeding in like basically being able to like infiltrate and save Lucas in like the middle of the night and basically escape back and them succeeding in like escaping from Pranav energy laboratory and basically as they would be trying to like make it back to their homes, like they would have to like pass through multiple forests, like the scenario that I'm looking so like as they would be running through like and as they would be like quickly running through like my Lucas Dustin as well as 11 would be like trying quickly run through like multiple forests in the middle of the night, like maybe like them running into maybe Nancy as well as like Jonathan being attacked by like monster at that point. It is like also like a possible scenario that I'm also going so that like at that point, even though 11 would be extremely scared, like I'm also going like still Mike telling 11 to like Mike maybe like himself trying to like save his sister like if it was like Nancy like Mike's sister like definitely Mike about friend like would be totally at that point even though he would be scared like he would be still building up the courage and would be trying to like attack like some monster but like at that point like the monster possibly attacking Mike and maybe about to take the life of Mike or like capture Mike. But like at that point, definitely that point would definitely be pushing 11 as well to like basically overcome her fears and basically 11 using her superpowers against that monster. It's like the scenario that I'm describing in that way. Like using 11 like superpowers, like 11 attacking like the monster and like the monster that way getting scared and really quickly uh, escaping through like the portal in one of the trees to the parallel world. That the possible scenario that I'm observing, and possibly maybe that being like the that absolute point of like where the whole revelations happening about like 11, where like everything Jonathan as well as Nancy knows like them sharing it with like Mike, Lucas and Dustin, and like everything they Mike, Lucas and Dustin know like them sharing like and about 11 like them sharing everything they know to like Nancy and Jonathan, and then like 11 as well, revealing to the two teams as to like everything. 11 has to tell them that everything 11 knows that basically all this information exchange happening during that point is also like kind of like this public scenario that embassy is also putting another and then with like all of them. And that way, like all of them, like even Nancy and Jonathan, like finding out about 11, 11 and basically them all deciding to like keep like the information about like 11 secrets and basically them once again like Mike and Nathaniel end up getting 11 back to Castle Bias and like 11 still hiding there in like Castle Bias while the rest of them would be like returning back to their home. Yet like I'm also feeling like yet I'm also feeling like 11 not feeling extremely lonely, especially because like definitely that absolute friendship by then will be formed. Like at that point, like with like 11 putting in all this like the scenario that I was looking at certainly with like 11 like Lucas actually witnessing all that effort that 11 would be advised and like would be tipping to like save Lucas and see Lucas from like Pranav uh the laboratory and also like that whole skills and everything just like for Lucas towards like 11 all that will be gone and Lucas as well that's Dustin as well as like all of them see 11 as like one of themselves like as like and my was the remuneration strategy. Then at that point, like 11 would be like desperate, not wanting that my can trusting to like find 11 while she would be hiding in like amplifiers. Like the scenario that I was drawing, and that is only due to like 11 by then like possibly having by then would be able to like sense that basically Lucas has gotten captured by Pranav state and it's like imprisoned in like Pranav the laboratory. So like 11 would want the last thing anyone would want would be for like once again for like Mike as well as like Dustin to for like Mike and Dustin like to like force us to like say Lucas and force us to like that way go up to like another one be laboratory. So like I'm sort of like 11 would be totally scared that like 11 would be hoping that Mike and Lucas won't be fighting 11. But like I was from that day like Mike and Lucas like actually finding 11 in like castle by like the scenario that I'm figuring. Okay, so like definitely one of the I'm personal right now with like Nancy and Johnson right now buying like along like the weapons like them also buying like their parts like I'm like even the eventual scenario that I'm personally but is definitely for like the monster to like totally avoid like the bear trap like the scenario or like either like the monster constantly avoiding being able to like avoid like the bear trap like I'm like leaning more towards the positive that rather than consciously avoiding like the bear it would be just like the monster getting lucky and that way like by sheer like the monster like avoiding like the bear trap that was set for by Nancy Johnson's like the scenario that I was doing. But like I was personally only putting like 11 for 11 not getting like the end I was sitting like 11 poorly. Eventually as like I was like the eventual scenario where like I was sitting like 11 and Dustin and Lucas's team would be like eventually according to my preparation would be like running into like Nancy and Johnson's team like in like the middle of the night like not what was that like Nancy and Johnson would be attacked by like the monster at that point like I was like actually Mike as well getting into trouble by the monster at that point and at that point like 11 totally rushing into like save the but like save Mike like but like at that point my different probably would be when like like 11 totally like falling into like the bear trap was like the scenario that I'm getting caught by like the bear trap like I'm suffering like it would move like this exact bear trap like the Nancy and Jordan would be setting like eventually would be ending up with like 411 like getting caught in that bear trap like the initial scenario that I'm doing yet like with all that pain like 11 still being able to like still using all of like the elements like current superpowers to like basically scare away that monster and save like my like primitive scenario that I'm going to bring and that as well creating like even more of like that extreme sympathy as well as like empathy from all of them towards like 11 certainly and that being like a main one another like pivotal point where like 11 like absolute genuinity towards lack of like the friendship towards like them like towards like Mike like and like the others like basically once again would be shown at that point like the window scenario that I was suffering and that's like totally like at that point definitely I was suffering like all of them totally appreciating elements like friendship and from that point on like them and like starting to like stop seeing like Eleven just like as just a weapon that they could like totally use to like basically to get to that win and find win and like what that's changing and from that point on like them realizing that the genuine good friend that like 11 is and basically seeing 11 for who she is like seeing 11 as also as like a human and also as like one among them and also as like a great friend is like the from that point on is definitely like the good scenario where and the Korean okay, so like definitely I'm sorry I'm question right now for like the mysterious person like driving by while saying like can't wait to see like that this movie while Lance James Johnson was like not like I'm also putting like that dialogue of that person. First of all, that person would be definitely either Nancy's classmate or like Nancy's schoolmate, especially when going to America. So like behind that dialogue, that can't wait to see Nancy's movie. Like basically, him saying that to Nancy would be precisely the reason would be precisely Steve. Stephanie was remember before like Stephanie was remember but like Steve would be right now so extremely jealous and basically Steve would be like in an extremely villanistic manner would be like planning on getting revenge on Nancy by precisely by those remembrances that like Steve who basically had basically talked about how weird Johnson was like basically Steve himself would be like even more extremely weird and extremely villainistic and disturbing of like a character that living with that like I was like that night that we had like the house party of Steve, like I'm super like at that night, like in Steve's room, like I'm super like Steve might have set up a video recorder, especially my reaction. So that this would be what like the dialogue would be like right now. This like person who throw by saying this dialogue about like conveying saying like Nancy would be exactly connected to this Stephanie with the Reynolds. So like I'm also trying like Steve to like the government created like leak that video and I'm also like it would be like in the even while hearing that dialogue from that person who throw by like like Nancy deep down possibly might be having that fear deep down within her of like maybe even a slight bit of fear might exist within like Nancy of like something bad like about to happen to Nancy. Definitely was famous. So like I was doing like the very next day that Nancy would be like showing up to school like I was doing like the schoolmates like basically all of them like totally uh, uh, making fun of Nancy's like scenario that I'm looking at. So like I was doing like Steve like totally leaking that video like the scenario that I'm looking at. Yet like I'm looking like definitely since like the word of Stranger Things right now would be like a word before like mobile phones like I was doing like definitely like that video still not while like a lot of students might have seen that video like I was saying that still that video might have definitely not gotten really so much as like the scenario that I'm looking. So like basically like all the majority of the students like making fun of Nancy and like Nancy for Nancy like crying and basically Steve like at that from that point on like Steve being like that total bully like on top of like doing this like I'm doing this Steve totally showing up and basically making fun of like Nancy whenever he gets the chance like the scenario that I'm bring at and Jonathan would be like struggling to like comfort Nancy and Nancy would be like going through such an extremely insecure phase while like Nancy would be like riding like the thought of going to school each and every single day from that day on like the scenario that I'm doing and like each and every single day, the students will be making fun of Nancy, and I'm looking at the very day in which like the very first day in which like the students will be like starting to like make fun of Nancy and like the video Steve will be using the video like from that day on itself like I'm looking like especially like the moment Nancy's mother would be finding out about this I'm looking like Nancy's mother as well how her approach towards Nancy as well like probably being in such an extremely unempathetic manner. It's like the scenario that I'm remembering, like her as well, totally blaming Nancy instead of like giving comfort and like courage to like Nancy. Like I'm remembering her as well, to like only blame Nancy at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm remembering. That like at that point, like Nancy would be like totally suffering a lot, and I'm remembering like Nancy. Like Johnson would be like that only place of comfort for like Nancy, like that only person, like that only person, and like Nancy could have peace and comfort, especially with the that like I was pregnant. Nancy, like not even staying home at all. It's like the scenario that I'm considering. Like Nancy will be like spending more time with like Johnson, but like even while Nancy won't be at home or like at school as well, like I was thinking like thingy. Since like Hawkins would be like a small town, like I was thinking whenever like someone from like Hawkins school would be like even while Nancy was just stepping out, like I was thinking like people making fun of Nancy's that the possible mental scenarios that I'm considering. So especially due to like the time period. And at that point, I'm also from Johnson does like absolute best to like comfort Nancy and like give Nancy that whole courage and everything. But like I'm also from even with I'm also from like Nancy would be like probably at like a rock bottom kind of like a feeling that will be like what Nancy will be having and like Nancy I'm also from it to be totally emotional and everything. And I'm also from during that time, like Jonathan would be that absolute pillar of strength and comfort for Nancy. That I'm also from like Jonathan telling Nancy to, and I'm also like the more Nancy would be spending time with like Jonathan, like I'm also from the more Nancy would be spending time with Jonathan, like the more Nancy would be like be able to like slowly come out of that rock bottom kind of like a state, like the scenario that I'm also from like Nancy would be in her shell and it's been the insecure shell that and that time was slowly eventually coming out of it and then like overcoming that all that insecurity of Nancy, like Nancy totally overcoming that and then like Nancy totally from that point on not caring at all to like fit in at all about anything in life. It's like the eventual scenario that I'm considering Nancy again like and Nancy from that point on like basically totally literally totally once again getting back to with like Jonathan to like basically and like to therefore search for like Barbara to save Barbara and then like basically Nancy and Jonathan once again like getting back onto their first it's like the scenario that I'm considering and from that and eventually from that point on I'm considering that to be like the whole turning point in like Nancy's life like basically I'm considering like Nancy going through such an insecure phase with like the people around Nancy like always make fun of Nancy but like then I'm considering like with like Jonathan being that pillar of strength and giving that courage like eventually Nancy growing so cold and then considering like Nancy totally not caring about like the students that would be making fun of Nancy and like Steve like about all of them like while all of them eventually would be like keeping on trying to like make fun of Nancy. Nancy usually like growing out of insecurities and like not caring about all those all of their attempts to like make fun of Nancy anymore at that point it's like the scenario that I'm observing. And like from that point on, like Nancy being like totally like public about her affectionate feelings towards like Jonathan as well is like the scenario that I was running, and that like totally like being that comeback for like Nancy is like the scenario that I was running, and that like totally crushing for Steve's ego to the extreme at that point is like the scenario as well that I was remembering that like even at that point I was like Steve once again like even at that point I was like that would be like totally even more hugely creating more of like an envy and like a feeling of grudge within Steve was like Nancy that I was like even after that like Steve maybe like literally like one day like trying to like bully Nancy while Johnson would be beside Nancy like the scenario that I was like so while or like I'm supposing it might be while Nancy will be like one day or by herself in school, like I'm supposing like maybe like Steve trying to like totally or like on like the outer premises of school, like at that point, like I was with Steve like totally trying to like bully Nancy. And at that point, like I was like Jonathan, especially during that time, like showing up and basically Jonathan totally putting Steve in his like place, like the scenario that I was doing. Steve totally being shocked, and basically that would be it for like Caesar's Steve. And I was really sure at that point, like Tommy as well as like Carol as well, probably they will be like ganging up on like Nancy and like totally uh, would be like bullying Nancy, but like at that point, like Jonathan showing up and like putting them in that place, like the scenario that I was referring, and like and that was the trying to do like the point where like Nancy's like up snake Phoenix was like Johnson with the deepening and strengthening even more and basically and it was going to do like at that point that basically Nancy will be like looking Jonathan in straight in the eyes and basically telling Jonathan that like she loves him and basically that was from like to and until that point I was like Nancy would have always told Jonathan that she loves him, but like that might have been until that time like her telling that Jonathan that would be like Nancy through going through her phase of like trying to come out of her insecurity and trying to like get back at like Steve and the others for like everyone who made fun of her like basically her attempt to like get back at them would be like Nancy telling Jonathan until that point which is what I'm going to bring like Nancy telling Jonathan that she loves him and basically them walking around romantically like it's like the scenario that I'm and that would all be like uh Nancy's effort that like she was trying to get back at like the others. But like I'm saying this would be like that final point where like Nancy would be like genuinely falling in love with like Jonathan and basically will be expressing it straight towards like Jonathan. It's like the scenario that I'm putting and I'm looking impression. Okay, so like definitely not the impression right now with like even after like everything still has come to Nancy that even right now, but like Nancy trying to like justify herself to like Steve. Definitely my first impression right now with like Steve like trying to like intimidate Nancy and asking her that to finish the sentence. Like I'm putting right now this would be like no like definitely the tipping point for like Nancy that I'm referring right now. Nancy say, finishing the sentence by saying that we are in love, like I and that she and Jonathan is in like love would be along the lines like and Nancy right now I'm going to like talk back to like Steve. It's like the scenario that I'm referring. And right then itself I come to like Steve totally being so extremely getting so extremely enraged that I'm maybe like Steve trying to like attack Nancy like the scenario that I'm delivering. But like right then I was looking totally for like Jonathan to like totally at that Jonathan would be totally I'm bring like right now would be totally especially maybe even waiting for that moment because like definitely my was impression that like Jonathan won't be afraid of like Steve and the others. Like the last time Steve and the others tried to uh, had bullied Jonathan, like at that point I was like the sort of the reason for like Jonathan's fear might have been solely due to like him uh, totally himself like feeling that he's in like because due to like the photos that he had taken. It's definitely not the impression. But right now, as of right now, like the current situation, definitely Jonathan, the like Jonathan won't be having any fear, even with like it's like not just Steve but like Steve, Sarah, and Tommy. Like I was still Jonathan by himself. Even he won't be like having any sort of fear towards like them. Just like the scenario that I'm also putting. And so that right now with like right now. So like I'm definitely naturally talking back to like Steve and basically straight away Steve like unable to contain his like anger like straight Steve trying to like attack Nancy and that would be like the moment I'm like Jonathan would be like especially protecting Nancy's like the scenarios that I'm doing and Nancy and I'm bringing Jonathan at that point only putting Steve in this place. Just like the scenario that I'm doing right now. It's like it was like Jonathan and Nancy right now having like being on their way from like the weapon shop, like definitely I'm going to bring like Jonathan would be totally still having his like weapon by his side. It's also definitely going to be that like I'm preparing like Jonathan pulling out his weapon and straight away like the gang of like Steve, Carol, and Tommy totally being scared and basically like Jonathan scaring them away like and putting them in their place for like the time being like the scenario that I'm preparing. But like still I'm like delivering like Steve, Carol, as well as Tommy like in an even more realistic manner, like I'm like them trying to like get revenge on like Jonathan and Nancy. And like so like I'm preparing them to like eventually make their return like definitely even like at like the very next day at school as well like I was thinking like them attempting to like get back at Jonathan and Nancy but like and I was going like for like a maybe like for like a brief period of struggle for like Nancy and Jonathan but like I was preparing because like definitely, especially like the very next day, I'm sitting there and presenting that like the students. I was at school, I was totally making fun of Nancy and all that. But like I was like them having like a Jonathan as well as Nancy having like a struggling period, but like I was still like them eventually overcoming that and that at that point like they were totally putting Steve and Tom and Carol in that place like permanently. It's like they were just scenarios that I'm delivering and like Nancy like being in love with like Jonathan at that point. Nancy being madly in love with Jonathan at that point would be like only slash causing that much more of like an extreme jealousy of like a suffering to like especially Steve, as well as like a massive ego hurting for like Tommy as well as Carol as well. It's like the even the scenario that I'm personally different and my personal reaction. So like the name of the reimbursement right now was that Steve being like a bully and basically like pushing, keeping repeatedly pushing Jonathan while like insulting Jonathan's family. Like basically, definitely, I'm whispering like Steve keeping on insulting Jonathan's family is like the scenario that I'm whispering until Steve reaches Will name. Like definitely slightly like I'm considering like right now it's like Steve right now insulting Terry Johnson's parents like I'm considering like Steve then moving on to like Will. The moment Steve will be like insulting Will and like giving another push like that would be like the point when I'm considering like but I'm considering right now especially with like Johnson right now and being like not having right now being revealed to like not have any weapons with me. That still I'm considering Jonathan like Steve like the moment Steve the scenario that I'm considering is like Steve finally like ending up inserting Will and basically giving a push to like another push to like Jonathan and that would be like it. That would be that tipping point for like Jonathan and at that point I'm also thinking like Jonathan was like a single punch like I'm considering like knocking Steve out cold. That's like the scenario that I'm considering and that's like the scenario that I was doing. And Tommy as well as Carol that totally being shocked and like them picking up Steve while Nancy and Jonathan would be like totally casually walking away at that point without even a care at all. It's like the eventual scenario that I'm also totally bringing and I'm looking. Okay, so like definitely my question right now was like even after like everything's still right now paid to Nancy and even on top of that like everything's still right now said about like Jonathan's family as well as like especially about like Jonathan's brother, especially in like the current situation of like Jonathan. Even after that, like basically with like as Jonathan retaliated basically Nancy even at that point like basically trying to like justify Jonathan for Steve like Nancy being desperately trying to like justify Jonathan for Steve trying to like win Steve's approval with like Nancy so desperately trying to like still win Steve's approval definitely my first revelation that like Nancy definitely even right now even to this point would definitely be in that extreme confused kind of like state like Nancy will be lacking that absolute clarity in being when it comes to like Steve, it's definitely my personal impression that like I'm preferring like this to totally like I'm preferring like once like definitely Hopper would be like by the time like Hopper would be like returning back like definitely Hopper talking to like Jonathan Jonathan would be still in the out of the like the scenario that I'm looking so Hopper totally speaking to Jonathan and Hopper definitely as being that father figure and like totally being able to like understand Hopper like definitely like the other two subordinates of Hopper won't be able to like understand Jonathan at all. It's like the scenario that I'm observing. But like Hopper definitely be able to understand Jonathan and I'm observing like Hopper totally ensuring that like the quick release of like Jonathan and definitely even after that like I'm observing like definitely Nancy totally blaming Jonathan for like retaliating in such a manner. Even after like Nancy having heard everything the, everything that Steve had uh, told to like Jonathan, talked about Jonathan, told Jonathan like basically still I'm suffering like Nancy totally blaming Jonathan for like retaliating. Like the scenario that I'm suffering that like that would be like totally creating that whole separation between like Jonathan and Nancy. That's the scenario that I'm suffering. I'm suffering like Jonathan not caring at all about Nancy and like Jonathan by himself trying to like going up to that market and like go up to Northern Forest and find with it's like the kind of thing. It's like the scenario that I'm suffering during this whole time period, I'm also like Nancy would be getting that time to like think for herself, like that thing happening at that point is like the scenario that I'm observing. And Nancy and Perseverance still being with like Nancy still at that point would be lacking that clarity and her still desperately approaching Steve with like the scenario that I'm observing. But like I'm observing in that whole time period while Jonathan would be moving away from like Nancy and staying away from Nancy that time period was for like eventually allowing Nancy to be able to like finally see the truth for what it is, and basically Nancy realizing that like Steve is like the only person that's like in like the wrong. That's like Nancy eventually realizing that it's like the scenario that I was bringing, and eventually I was bringing like Nancy herself like shouting out to like Steve and basically breaking up with Steve and like Nancy herself like basically that way like through the hard way like Ambassador Nancy learning the hard lesson through the hard way like Nancy like realizing the truth that everything Jonathan had told about like not just Steve but like about like the others while while Jonathan and Nancy had their fight in like Murphy Fox, like while they were searching for like Barbara and Bill initially in like Murphy Fox together, like that whole quarrel that Nancy had towards like Jonathan, like during then like everything Jonathan said, like the uh, during then like everything Jonathan had told Nancy is like at the actual truth. It's right, like basically that Nancy realizing that by herself after like trying to like eventually like once like Jonathan would be like staying away from like Nancy and Jonathan and Nancy at that point I was desperately once again trying to like clean Steve's approval but like during that whole time period I was when Nancy herself realizing that like Jonathan was right this entire time and then I was when like Nancy coming back to like Jonathan and basically apologizing to Jonathan. It was like the eventual possible scenario that I was depicting and like my history and the show. It was like the main history and fiction right now was like the TV show, like the TV quiz show, like that basically is playing in like areas of like which like areas would be like seriously watching, especially Michael Surrey and the what will be happening, especially Michael Surrey and the precisely and even that TV show there being a quiz as to like what's the good best gift for like a college student like basically people will precisely I'm still thinking about the precisely because of like not having like because of like the rise in like the past having been back when she was in like working in medical trust of having gone through experiments like kind of like similar to like possibly similar to that of like 11 like I'm referring like to especially with like 11 through her experience having gained telekinesis possibly having definitely gained like technical especially telekinesis and telepathic ability as well as some of the things that are really like undiscovered and unrevealed, either unrevealed psychic powers that like 11 will be having, or like I'm referring 11 developing those abilities eventually as like time passes, like the scenario that I'm losing right. So definitely in the case of like Ria is like because of like the experiments of like Turner and the ability that Ria might have psychic powers that Ria might have got might have been like future fight like future prediction and future fight like maybe like Ria might have totally and something to remember mentioned that like with Ria like totally believing that like her daughter like Jane would return like I'm definitely Serious would be like might not only seen like the future that basically of like her daughter returning back and by the time her daughter again will be like returning back 11 will be returning back to her home like at that point like she would be like totally also like Serious would be totally well aware that like 11 at that point would be like totally more than brilliant enough to like straight away into college definitely to straight away enter into college is definitely my position to understand. This might be the precise reason for like the race right now like the television show, the reels that would be watching would be like even if this as to like what's like the best gift for like a college student. It's definitely my brain because like the reels would be like while remaining silent would be patiently waiting for the day her daughter would be returning and like so that like she could like go to college at that point and basically at that point for like the race to like basically buy or like give her like the best gift that she could like uh, give her for like by the time she her daughter will be running and go, heading off to like college like basically all this will be like the best reason for like the best TV show that like a racer right now would be like seeing being like such an attractive just definitely my very interesting. So the exact television show would be like something like an eventual foreshadowing to that point in like the distant future when like the race daughter Jane like or 11 like will be like eventually like the future like would be like finally making it back all the way back to like the race home is like my personal impression. So like the name of the impression is that like careers even to the present day would be like perfectly okay, perfectly fine. It would be like the careers consciously deciding to like remain silent precisely because of like her being like well enough to be aware that absolutely no one would be able to like not even her sister would be able to like understand what she's like trying to what she knows, the things she knows and about like the things that would be about that would eventually happen. It's definitely my personal aim, which like the race holding would be knowing due to having possibly having like a bit of like powers. It's definitely my personal aim. So right now with mother like right before leaving the race home, like with mother like in a disturbed manner, like looking at like careers at careers like watching the TV, like I was for like that it would be like solely due to like Will's mother, like that disturbance within Will's mother would be solely due to like her uh, that disturbed look by Will's mother. The race will be solely her having that fear within her of like the possibility possibility of that years passing and basically will still not being found and basically that way like with mother as well ending up like careers uh, would be like that fear that like right now with mother will be having within her as like she's like disturbing feeling that disturbance while looking at like career right now. It's definitely my totally impression. Okay, so like also like remember the impression that like as like careers like staring at like the TV screen like I was careers would be totally watching that TV show that such absolute seriousness is definitely my impression. And she to be totally like for careers like as a mother like totally preparing herself like trying to get well prepared for as she's like totally and patiently like looking forward to that day eventually like the future which she might have only seen to her future like when her daughter 11 or like Jane would be like returning back and making it back to her home so that like at that point like she would be able to like Reyes would be able to like so being well prepared for that like she could at that point would be able to like shower her Jane with like all the gifts that she couldn't buy for like Jane her daughter Jane like until that day like all these great number of past years like that they would be like remaining separated until that day, like for her to like make up for all that by showering Jane or like Eleven with all that gifts on that day that Jane or like Eleven would be like returned back to her home. Choose careers like basically to be well prepared for that day would be the first reason for like careers to be like seeing that TV show which shows that such absolute seriousness is definitely my personal impression. Okay, so like the new Korean person right now was like the female like officer at like the station right now, like telling Nancy that basically only how make Jonathan did what he did, like basically and attack the police officer and all that. Like I'm different, like still definitely my Korean impressions definitely that like definitely for Jonathan to like totally lose control to such extent would be like would have absolutely nothing to do at all with like Jonathan's love towards like Nancy but like it solely has to do with like solely has to do with like how much like Jonathan loves his brother Will. It's definitely my friend. And basically like the moment Jonathan totally had extremely lost control was like to the point of even attacking a police officer was solely due to like Jonathan being in such absolute pain. My friend mentioned that it definitely might have definitely not been love at all, but it might have been that absolute pure pain, extreme pain within Jonathan, the moment Lexi had insulted will of all people definitely my favorite. Might have been solely due to that pain of connection to Will that like Jonathan had at that was lost within like Jonathan at that point. That might have totally resulted in like Jonathan losing control to such extent. It's definitely to the point of attacking a police officer. It's definitely my personal theory and prediction. So like I'm preferring like right now like the female police officer saying it's loud to Nancy, and I was wondering right now with like Nancy like totally approaching Jonathan. I was thinking like Jonathan right now simply won't be. My first impression is that Jonathan right now could not be at all be in like the mood for like such talk from Nancy. So like the scenario that I was even right now, Jonathan would be still in that pain of like wind of losing wind is definitely my favorite impression. So like I'm just maybe this like a current right now this like current conversation between like Nancy and Jonathan I'm considering maybe not going well. It's also like a possible scenario that I'm just on the thing and my personal impression. And that possibly maybe even resulting in like Nancy just taking the decision to like stay away from like Jonathan and maybe that and like that way like Nancy staying away from like Johnson for like the time being until like eventually Nancy would be like faced with that would be actually by herself would be like coming to that realization that like within that time that like she was wrong but the wrong was on her side that basically Johnson the entire time was absolutely right and she had that like she had totally failed to like totally understand Jonathan is like have come to such a possible realization like about the sequence of like a scenario of like a scene that I'm totally putting and that totally bringing her and bringing Nancy eventually towards like Jonathan was like Nancy eventually approaching to like Jonathan and then once again like them assuming that therefore search for Will and Barbara. So like an individual of the scenario that I'm flipping. And until that point, I was wondering like Johnson actually by himself, like totally searching for Will. It's also like an individual of the scenario that I'm also flipping along with Ryan. So like the name of the Ryan fixing right now was like Mike and Dustin like basically shouting out for like 11 in like a forest. That forest would definitely be Markwood Forest, definitely one of the mention and like 11 as well. So like I was looking like right now, even right now I'm looking like definitely 11 not going up to Mike and Dustin, but like I was looking instead like 11 would be like totally hiding herself. Like I was like 11 totally running and finding like constantly finding like tacit bias right there. Tacit bias would be nearby to like where 11 is right now. It's definitely one of the remedy. So like I was going like 11 will be hiding. But then tacit bias is like the scenario to hide away from like Mike and Dustin and to prevent Mike and Dustin from finding 11. And I'm just like the I'm just going right now like specifically my preparation that like the only reason for like 11 still hiding deciding like hide from Mike and Dustin would be most likely even more than anything, it would be related to like definitely Lucas. It's definitely another person that I'm sitting on. Like Lucas by now might have at least got might have totally gotten captured by like Brenna's people, and I'm also like they might have totally captured an in person like start and put like Lucas in like an in person state within like Brenna's energy lab right now. Even right now, it's like the scenario that I was doing. That would be like the current situation of Lucas, and I was doing like 11 being able to like sense that even from a distance from the current distance 11 is like 11 still would be able to like sense that that like Lucas is like trapped in that bonus energy laboratory and 11 would like definitely right now currently right now at this very moment 11 won't be the last thing 11 would be wanting would be to like basically go back into like Brenner's 11 but into Brenner's energy laboratory just to like save Lucas. It's definitely my personal impression. So definitely precisely like 11 will be totally fearing that basically if Mike and Dustin finds her then like they will be totally asking for her help to like basically forcing her to like basically go up to Brenner's energy laboratory to like save Lucas would be maybe along the line like 11 would be changes definitely my premise. 11 will be totally assuming that basically Mike and Lucas might have totally found out about like Mike and Dustin might have totally by now might have already found out about like Lucas's situation. So like they would be looking for Eleven to like basically to rescue and save Lucas would be along the line. Eleven would be assuming is also like my book for the ambition of like a double thing. So like anyway, regardless, I'm possible like even if like 11 through her telepathy might be able to like read my cat Dustin's mind and maybe even realize that they might not know about like Lucas being trapped. Like still, I'm possible like there will be that element of like a certain level of guilt within like 11 that we believe Mike if like Mike and Dustin finds 11 like that basically like she would have to like help them and basically that at that point she would have to let go of to like Rena's energy laboratory and that fear would be so extreme for like 11 that like the 11 simply wouldn't want to like do that as of right now at this moment. So definitely I was able to like especially because of all the certain numbers like in 11 right now definitely hiding in like castle bias to like so that like they hope that like Mike and us so that like Mike and Dustin won't be able to like find 11 is like the scenario that I'm observing right now to happen, especially when the rumors. Okay, so like the name of the impression right now with like Troy as well as his friend right now showing up like instead of 11 like I'm definitely right now with like Mike and Dustin running definitely my personal impression to that like Mike I'm considering definitely as he would be like Mike and Dustin would be like trying to like run and get away like I'm like Mike totally perfectly ending up tripping and falling. It's like the scenario that I'm considering. So at that point, like I'm something like Troy and his friend like totally catching up to Mike is like the scenario that I'm considering. And I'm considering Dustin like stopping at that point is like also like the scenario that I'm considering. But like I'm considering like Troy's like biggest target would be like Mike more than anything, especially after like the incident in like Hawkins store. So like I'm considering Troy, especially with like Troy having a weapon, like I'm considering like Troy basically trying to like attack Mike, and at that point I was different like Dustin trying to like stop Troy, but like I was different like Troy's friend, like the person who's like around like Troy, like his friend, like I was different totally like holding like Dustin or like pushing Dustin away, and like then Troy once again trying to like attack Mike using the weapon is like the scenario that I was different. But like at that point would be when like I was thinking once again like 11 would be like showing up to like save Mike like the scenario that I was different. Because like 11 definitely was like 11 superstars like 11 would be able to like sense like what's happening around like 11. So like 11 showing up at that precise moment to save Mike and basically once again like 11 using her superpowers and this time I was referring like 11 actually using her like superpower that to the point of like basically sending Troy flying away. It's like the scenario that I was referring and this would be that absolute point where like Troy would be actually realizing that like actually even seeing like 11 in her actual buzz cut uh, look and basically like this will be like the point where like I'm person like Troy would be like and person like Troy even real at that point even realizing that basically that like Mike Lucas and Dustin had basically brought this girl to like the had earlier brought this girl to Eleanor to like basically to the school with like a disguise. So like I'm assuming that itself like I'm assuming like creating that sense of vision in like Roy that way. And on top of that, like with like 11 right now, I'm assuming like showing up to show up and to save Michael like 11 shortly using the superpowers as well. Just like the definite scenario that I'm assuming. So definitely I'm assuming like even though Troy would be running away scared at that point, like I was looking like Troy still using this information I was pretending like Troy eventually using this information to like fight back at like Mike and like 11 is like the mentioned scenario that happened. This information about like 11 hours Troy totally using maybe even trying to like blackmail Mike with like the information about like 11 or like about being Troy like using this information trying to like use this information like Troy's advantages to cause suffering to like Mike and the like an individual scenario and to like 11 is like the eventual scenario that I'm talking about the again of the revolution. Anyway, so like the Nathan revolution right now is like basically mice are right now being forced to like jump into that lake from that height into that lake where like Will's like dummy fate body was like found. Like I was wondering like definitely Mike totally right now like definitely jumping is like the scenario that I'm bring. And while all this will be happening, like I'm thinking like 11 would be like would be definitely able to like sense all this happening from a distance. So like I'm thinking like 11 would be like giving it her absolute everything like 11 already in like a state of like really after like using like her superpowers like even at like the supermarket as well. Like basically with like 11 right now itself like already having like the north lead and everything like I'm still like 11 will be totally exhausted as well. So but like I'm still 11 using all of our strength like basically uh, uh, you don't be able to professionally sense like and sense that like Mike is supposed to like Mike is being forced by these kids to like basically to jump from that height to that lake where like even Hopper had basically said that basically even jumping from such a height into that exactly would be like causing death. So like with like Mike about to jump and 11 will be able to like send each and every single thing that's like happens and 11 the extreme that's also 11 number to bring would be most likely running with all her strength to like solely to like save Mike right now was definitely one of the reason. But like I'm bring like right now Mike actually being forced and basically Mike totally taking that jump to like the scenario that I'm doing. Mike would be jumping and I would make a right before Mike would be totally right just at the very last second before like Mike would be landing on and crashing onto that lake. At that very last second I was like 11 would be able to like make it to that location and I was like 11 using her superpowers and stopping Mike's fall at that very last second. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. That way, 11 saving Mike is like the scenario that I'm looking at. And that power, like usage, superpower usage of like 11 at that point to like save Mike. I'm looking that to take a lot of toll in like 11 health right now on like 11's body right now for the time being. It's like the scenario that I'm looking like that causing like even more of like a nosebleed for like for 11. Same my campus from totally causing like even more like a nosebleed for like for 11. It's like the scenario that I'm bring. Yet like I'm bring like 11. Even after that, like totally even pushing it even more and basically even though 11 will be extremely exhausted, like I'm like 11 once again like using her superpowers to like basically to basically tear away like Troy as well as like uh, using a superpower with Troy and his friend and that way, like even tearing away Troy and his friend is like scenario that I'm different. But like at that very moment, like after that usage of like 11, like superpower, like I'm 11 will be so extremely exhausted to that extreme that like 11 straight away falling unconscious like the scenario that I'm different. And at that point, like definitely Dustin as well as Mike Crosby taking care of 11 is like the scenario that I'm doing. And then once again, like having being faced with that realization of like a moment as to like how precious was our friend, precious and how genuine and how good of a friend 11 is like the scenario that I'm looking. And definitely as for like Lucas, I'm definitely putting like Lucas won't be returning. It's like the scenario. For the time being, it's definitely my opinion. Like, but like Lucas, like while Lucas would be like checking everything with like the binoculars and everything, like uh, definitely by then, like by the time Lucas would be done checking with his like binoculars, like definitely like the person who's like working for like Prana, like who's standing outside of Lucas home, like by then would be like showing up uh right there and basically would be like really capturing Lucas is like the scenario that I was doing and Lucas straight away getting taken to like Bruno's lab and ending up in like an in-person like a kind of like a trap state within like Bruno's lab of it. It's like sort of scenario that I'm doing. And still think remember the mention that Brunner would be interrogating Lucas and Lucas exactly like right now doesn't have to reveal everything about 11 to Troy like Amazon like Lucas as well like revealing like everything he knows about like 11 and everything that happens so far to Brunner at that point is like the scenario that Amazon and it will be definitely after that like revelation by Lucas that Amazon like Mike and Dustin as well as like 11 would be easily able to like save Lucas is like the scenario that Amazon would remember. Also on the Wolverine for like a scenario as well where like after like the interrogation like of Lucas like unfortunately literally for enough taking comes to the decision to like literally take even Lucas's life was like also like a possible scenario that I'm doing. So like for offering him like workers to like basically take from the doctor to like take Lucas's life. So like at that point like Lucas being so extremely scared and like as like that person who will be working for and who will be about to take Lucas life at that very last second will be when like I'm considering like finally like Dustin as well as Mike along with like 11 will be able to like make it there and like it would be at that very last second like being in that very last second at like Lucas would be so extremely afraid of like and would be thinking that he's about to die you could get that very last second that like solely due to 11 like composition Lucas being saved and being able to like even escape from Brenner's laboratory and that we have come back to life is like an eventual possible scenario that I'm going to cutting and my preparing. Okay, so like the feeling of the 3% right now with like 11's mind once again shifting to like the memory of like the timeline like 11 during Brenner's experiment, walking up to like the faceless monster to like communicate with it like I'm preparing like right now as like 11 like walking towards that faceless monster like what 11 would be like shockingly seeing something different like that monster that 11 is like seeing would be definitely like the parallel world version of like 11 that would out only due to that the parallel world version of like kind of like experiment on like parallel world version of 11 going wrong 11 might have the parallel version like 11 might have turned into this monster the new so like right now the scenario that I'm looking is like right now is like 11 like walking towards like the face this monster that's like basically doing something like I'm like as 11 gets so extremely close like what 11 will be seeing Amazon to be like that monster, faceless monsters, like quickly turning towards like 11 in that dark void. And they are like Amazon, like 11 shockingly seeing 11's space within like the face area of like that dark monster is like the of like that monster is like the scenario that I'm delivering as of right now. At that giving like 11 like the biggest scare and shock, and 11 at that point might obviously once again like came out of like that experiment. Might have been what might have happened to me and I think reimbursement. Okay, so like definitely my the reimbursement right now with like 11 right now confessing to like Mike that basically he was the one who opened like the gates and basically right now with like 11 telling Mike that basically he is the monster. Like definitely I'm still 11 with the reimbursement that like definitely like in that dark world like that during the experiment like that 11 right now remember like basically when 11 had basically touched that monster and basically that monster had basically turned back to like 11 that basically even the biggest scare of like 11 like even more than that monster might have been definitely like since like 11 even back then definitely had her like might have definitely had like not only her telekinesis but also might have only had her telepathy powers as well so like I'm considering when like the monster turned back towards like 11 and screamed at like 11 at that point, like basically that monster might have straight away communicated to 11 as well. Is that what might have happened? Is that never with Ramadan? Like straight away, like 11 might have like using her telepathic powers might have pressed like the monster's mind and basically might have realized that like it's in fact 11. Like that monster is in fact 11. But like it won't be like the real world 11, but it will be only like the parallel world version of like 11 being turned into this monster due to like Brenner's experiment, parallel world version of Brenner's experiment going wrong in like the parallel world. Definitely my was the impression that I'm sitting out on. This would be the reason for like 11 is like in kind of like a guilty feeling, kind of like a manner like 11 with tears like for 11 telling Mike that you see, I am the monster. It will be precisely because of this reason, that's definitely my personal impression. Okay, so like the name of the reimbursement right now, as for like a bunch of like Hawkins like power and lights when being present in like Pranav like energy laboratory to move really because of like after like that one scientist in like Pranav laboratory in like the beginning might have only betrayed Pranav and basically might have simply wanted to be like the first to like open the portal using 11 like he might have only let out 11 and might have but like 11 cells like he might have only opened up like the portal might have been what might have happened so like at that point, like definitely opening up of like the portal. Still thinking about the mentioned there, it would be especially opening up of like the portal that would be like what's required for what for which the energy even more than like it's possible to be produced by like humans would be like maybe requires definitely the mention for like the act of like opening up like of like the portal, but for like the maintaining of like the portal in its like already opened up state like for that like emphasis like electrical energy required won't be like that extremely great might be like it might of reimbursed. So this might be the precise reason for like the great number of like tokens like power and like band being present in like apprentice energy level. It will be precisely like all the bands from like the Hawkins town where like I'm considering like the power throughout like the entirety of like the town of Hawkins and Burlington, like Brenner using his influence uh, might have managed to like basically like pay them enough to be able to like redirect like a lot of that stored power, especially towards like Brenner energy laboratory, so that like he could like maintain like the energy, maintain like the portal in its like portal gate in its like opened up state in like run up laboratories. That's new the impression. So this might be the precise reason for like multiple like power and light van being present in like Brenner's energy laboratory. It's definitely my primary impression. Yeah, so like the thing of the Korean production right now with like Brenner and his like entire team, like his entire army, like basically right now setting off to like capture 11 with like then knowing like the location of 11 and with like the current situation being like Mike and Dustin precisely being beside 11 right now. I'm also talking definitely like the scenario to be like 11 totally like using her superpowers and basically trying to like stop like Brenner's team, but like I'm also trying like while and I'm also like even 11 totally being extremely exhausted by now basically repeatedly without much great delay like repeatedly using 11 superpowers that basically 11 going unconscious from exhaustion. That's like one possibility, and that way like not only 11 but like Mike as well as Dustin getting captured. That's like one possibility that I'm considering, or like I'm considering like or I'm considering precisely like Brenner like army showing up and basically 11 only using the superpowers at them and basically breaking a certain level of damage, but like right then it's just like so like maybe I'm considering at that point like Brenner from a distance like shouting out to like 11 that basically that Papa will spare your friends with like uh 11 comes with like basically 11 plus lines, and for 11 maybe at that point like since like runner is in would definitely be in fact like the father of like of 11, and the truth is that like 11 totally sees like runner has like have father like still no matter how much like runner would have hurt has in fact hurt 11 like because of like 11 seeing runner has her father like still maybe like a person like 11 totally falling for it and basically 11 deciding to like go along with like agree to that runner and basically going along with like runner's pick. And then straight away like even though Mike and Dustin would be like repeatedly telling 11 at that point to like not listen to runner like so like 11 totally listening to runner because like 11 would be desperate to like to for like nothing to happen to Mike, that like 11 totally agreeing to runner and getting getting captured by taken away by Brenner, and straight away like Brenner like not keeping his word and straight away capturing Mike and Russell as well and basically taking them as well along with them. It's also like the scenario that I'm looking in that way like I'm looking like as Lucas would be like watching this is like binoculars like I'm looking like Lucas talking to seeing like I'm both different like because you're often seeing like Mike and Dustin along with like 11 as well being taken into Foreigners Energy Laboratory, like the scenario that I'm looking, and that way like Lucas alone perfectly having being like the only person who would have seen as to like where as to like the situation with like Mike and Dustin as well as like 11 like the scenario that I'm looking bring that like I'm looking like then eventually for like Dustin, I mean like Lucas to like stealthy, uh, and I was really like just deciding not to like head back home, and Lucas is stealthy in like or like I was thinking like Lucas then heading back home, with like the constant intent with like that absolute intent to like sneak out of home in like the middle of the night while in a fully prepared manner according to like Lucas, and basically to so back to like for another like another laboratory and basically infiltrate into like the foreigners energy laboratory somehow, and basically that way for him to like save Mike and Dustin would be like Lucas' plan. It's like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way like I'm looking still look at somehow succeeding and like infiltrating into foreigner lab in like the middle of the night. It's like one possibility, or like I'm looking like Lucas in like the middle of the night trying to infiltrate into like foreigner lab and basically Lucas getting captured and basically put into like a same person like state along with like Mike and Saskia. Like so the possibility that I'm looking for. Anyway, like then like probably escaping from like the instant like state or like I'm looking like to be looking successfully sneaking in into like foreigners and not the laboratory and saving like so that after somehow Lucas managing like save Mike and Dustin from their imprisoned kind of state, and at that point, like them searching for like 11, and basically, like even though Lucas would be totally against like saving 11, like Ambassador, still Ambassador like them initially talking into like eventually reaching that conclusion to like basically work together and save 11. So like Ambassador like as like they would be trying to like save 11, Ambassador like 11. And especially after like capturing 11, like this is like the scenario that I'm also bringing, like Foreigner will be totally replacing like all that expensive like energy source, like electrical energy source, which like Foreigner will be totally using to like maintain that portal in like that open up state, like instead like removing that like for like using like 11 to like easily amplify like those electrical energies or something is like the scenario that I'm doing that way. So that way I'm doing like 11 at that point would be in that precise portal room at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like at that point like my Lotus and up like totally sneaking and infiltrating in more into that kind of chapter. So like I'm considering like that totally possibly favoring like my Lucas and Dustin during that night like the scenario that it would be during night time so it will be happening. It's also definitely preparing. So like I'm considering like precisely as like Mike Lucas and Dustin will be able to like successfully escape from their imprisoned like state, like the person monitoring like CCTV in that area would be precisely luckily falling facility during that time was like the scenario that I'm luckily for like my different subject such a scenario happening and them being able to like make it towards like that precise location energy portal location eventually like the scenario that I'm delivering. So like by then like I'm talking like uh, like uh, like the whole siren I'm talking maybe like a siren happening in like within like for another energy laboratory or like definitely like for another his team like finding out about like the escape of like Mike Lucas and Dustin and rather than like right now I'm pretty much that like rather than like Mike Lucas and Dustin succeeding in like escaping with like 11 at that point like Mike Lucas and Dustin like basically succeeding in like saving 11 and escaping out of like Brenner's laboratory and then like the scenario that I'm totally leaning seriously towards is definitely for like has like Mike Lucas and Dustin would be escaping and making it towards like the portal room where like 11 would be most likely in like an imprisoned like state. Or like I'm talking like them making it to like 11 very same old room within like Brenner's laboratory where like 11 would be once again would be like locked in. And for 11 would be totally scared. And I'm talking like Mike Lucas end up thing after like escaping like them totally searching for 11 and finding 11's room and them being able to like save 11. But like I'm bring up, they would be trying to like make it out of like Brenner's energy laboratory. Basically, like them getting like eventually cornered like in a kind of or chased by like Brenner's team. So like at that point, like them totally like that totally forcing them to like run towards like maybe like it would be that totally forcing them to like run towards like that precise portal hole. And basically there as like Brenner and his team would be like walking towards like Mike Lucas and Dustin at 11 to like capture them like and like at that point like them totally finally come to the decision to like basically enter to that portal and escape through that portal. It's like the scenario that I was able that way like Mike Lucas Dustin as well as 11 like to escape from Brenner and his team like them entering into the portal is like the scenario that I'm giving them escaping into that portal is like the scenario that I'm whispering, and I'm definitely putting like that's the scenario. Then I'm also putting like the first person that they would be meeting on like the battle side. I'm also saying would be definitely Barbara and not Will at all. So it's definitely I'm ready. So it was like the very end that they would be like be able to like find Will. But until that point, like I'm also saying like 11 as well as my Lucas and Dustin like basically like exploring and throughout like the parallel world and basically them eventually like I'm talking like it will be like after a lot of like exploration and hiding from all these like monsters in like the parallel world that they would be like eventually be able to like get to it and running they would be like eventually running into Barbara like the scenario that I'm talking about first and then like towards like the very end them being able to like find well, it's like the scenario that I'm looking for. But like by then I'm looking for like definitely like but like Mike, Lucas and Dustin, you be like only they are being like three disappearance at the same time, like in such a kind of situation that quickly was like such a situation that totally forcing Nancy to like be even more worried and be like absolutely willing to like face up fears and face any risk to like save her father like Mike, especially with like Mike at that point would be going with the scenario. So like that I'm considering like by then like I'm considering like eventually like Nancy and Jonathan as well deciding to like enter into like the battle world and then succeeding in that as well as like on the other hand like Hopper as well would be entering into like the battle world and that was like this mother like Joyce as well like because like even the Hopper would be doing just like absolute matter to ensure that like she doesn't enter into like the battle world still she as well like totally entering along with like Hopper with like the even just scenario that I'm looking for with the thing and as for like how exactly Hopper might what sort of Lena Miriam has got like how exactly Hopper might be discovering about like the parallel world, about like the monster and like the parallel world. I'm going to bring it to be precisely without much great delay that Lena was bringing, especially with like the current situation with like Jonathan as well as Nancy being like Jonathan being in like a narcissistic state and like things like Nancy right now is with like Jonathan and was bringing like this totally most likely resulting definitely resulting in like and especially with like Hopper as well as like Joyce like his mother like basically learning about like Johnson like definitely without much great delay or like was like Hopper making it there and then was like through their that whole interaction while like Hopper as well as like Joyce will be making it towards like Johnson and Nancy like through that whole interaction episode and like that possibly for like definitely for like the information exchange possibly happening and like Hopper totally finding out about like the whole through Nancy about like the whole portal and basically uh portal to like a different world about like the monster through like Jonathan and Nancy like I was from like from this Hopper but like I was from maybe like Joyce as well finding out about this it's like the scenario that I was like or like I was like Jonathan being like acting in such an extremely concerned manner towards like Joyce's mother that like I'm looking like Jonathan like not revealing anything while in like the presence of like Joyce and like something like Jonathan eventually like private in like private like basically be revealing all this information to like open. There's also like an eventual multiple possible scenarios that I'm going to bring in on the framework. So definitely my first syndrome down supporting right now with like Mike as well as Dustin being beside 11 and Brenner and Pretender being like basically on their way to like capture 11. Definitely I was doing like specific members that like Mike and Dustin as well would be getting captured by Brenner's team and taken would be taken into like Brenner's like possibly taken captured and taken into like Brenner's and the laboratory for interrogations definitely members. So like unlike in like unfortunate Benny's case like I'm like in like Mike and Dustin's case, like I'm assuming like them Brenner not deciding to like straight away take their life. It was precisely because of like Brenner wanting to know before Brenner would be totally planning on simply taking the life of like Mike and Dustin. But like before that Brenner might want to like thoroughly interrogate like Mike as well as Dustin so that like for Brenner to find out like who all knows about like 11 and 11's like superpowers and everything. So like Brenner's plan and everything would be most likely to interrogate Mike and Dustin and find out like the list of people who knows about 11. Uh, and then for like him to like take the life of not only Mike and Dustin and but also to like take the life of all the people who knows about 11 and 11 to like superpowers and everything. It's definitely my personal impression. Also like definitely not the impression right now with like Mike and Dustin along with like 11 like basically entering through the store into this like house. Like definitely that house would be definitely Mike's house itself. It would be just like the through like the back door that of like Mike's home itself that like right now Mike Lucas and Mike Dustin and 11 would be entering into. It's definitely my Mudra emerging. So like and the like still like Brenner and their team on their way like like still about like Mike's family definitely right now would be like totally getting that that new information. So like since because like since like the current situation is like Jonathan because like currently Nancy is in like the state and I was wondering like definitely like the subordinates of Open might have totally phoned Nancy's parents, like Mike's parents and told them about like the whole like about like Nancy being in like the station and everything. It's definitely a good feeling. So only because of that, like I'm like right now like Mike's family is not going to die solely because they won't be present at like Mike's home. So like solely they would like and they would all have like a Mike's parents like both of them as well as Mike's little sister. They might have taken Mike's little sister as well uh, along with them. So like I'm just like them all might be right now in like the present situation would be at like the stage that along with like Nancy and Jonathan's definitely member. So solely due to this reason, I'm considering right now as like Mike and Dustin and 11 would be like entering through the back doors to like Mike's home. Like Mike's home right now, absolutely no one will be present in Mike's home right now. It's definitely not dream. So like solely due to this reason, I'm considering like Brenner and his team like right now. So without much delay, going up to like Mike's home and like quickly entering into like Mike's home. And I'm considering like and then straight away straight away like Mike and Dustin like totally panicking and asking them like who are they and all that like and I was like 11 like quickly hiding in like somewhere within like the basement and I was like uh definitely run around his team like without much question like then straight away searching through all through like the microphone and then straight away like and then like from like the basement like them they capture in the vendors like the scenario that I was doing and won't be able to escape. So like at that point, I was like right as they would be about to capture 11, like I was like 11 using her powers, but still I'm like 11 totally either totally due to like extreme efforts and like 11 going unconscious and that way like Brenner's being capturing 11. Or like I was like 11 would be using her superpowers and at that point like I was like uh Brenner would be like showing when Brenner would be like shouting from like the from like ground floor to like the basement that way towards like 11 that basically like I will fuck your friends if you don't come with me like basically so that's like my preference. So like it will be either one of these two scenarios in which like 11 will be taken away, captured by Pranav screen and taken away. And then all of them like Pranav like automations like team to like basically capture take Mike as well as and capture like Mike as well as personality. So like them all being taken away to like and getting trapped and imprisoned in like an appeal laboratories like the scenario that I'm just looking at the so like I'm just find like by the time so like definitely one of the preemptions definitely that like by the time like my his parents along with like Nancy will be returning back from like the station and entering their home like from that point on I'm also like them not seeing Mike and I'm also um like that night, even once it turns night, once it's night time as well, like them totally might not return back home. It's like the scenario that I'm different. So like then my dad and Nancy getting totally worried. And for like Mike and I was like from this point on, I'm considering like the possibility of like Mike not possibly not returning back anytime soon. It's like the possible scenario that I'm just totally different. I'm not different. So like my secondary impression as for is for like the scenario that basically after like Bill and then Barbara's disappearance, like the next disappearance being like three disappearance together happening. Okay, and that would be that of like Mike, Dustin, and Lucas. It's like the initial scenario that I was not remember as Mike, Lucas, and Dustin along with like along with the frantically searching in like the parallel world for like their missing Bill. It's like the scenario, the scenario that I'm considering.